The sun beat down on Amelia's meticulously maintained front yard, glinting off the polished brass of her gate's new imposing lock. It wasn't the kind of lock you could pick with a paperclip or jimmy with a credit card. This was a heavy-duty, industrial-grade padlock, the kind meant to keep out armies, not a homeowner trying to get to work. Its cold metallic sheen mocked the familiar warmth of her home, a harsh, unexpected intrusion into her peaceful morning. Amelia clutched her car keys, her knuckles white, the plastic digging into her palms so hard it left imprints. She'd woken up late, a rare indulgence after a grueling week of deadlines for her graphic design projects, only to find her automatic gate, the one she'd paid a small fortune to have installed for security and convenience, a true luxury after years of urban living, impenetrable. Her sleek, charcoal gray SUV, a symbol of her hard-earned independence and mobility, sat uselessly in the driveway, trapped. There had been no prior notice, no warning, no sympathetic knock on the door, just a cold, metallic barrier and a profound, infuriating sense of violation. The gentle hum of the gate's motor, a sound that usually signified freedom and privacy as it silently glided open, was now replaced by the unsettling, almost suffocating silence of forced enclosure. It was a stark, aggressive statement, and Amelia felt it deep in her bones. Her property, the Haven, sat on a generous acre at the very edge of the sprawling Sunstone Ridge HOA, bordering a serene, natural preserve. It was a beautiful, semi-secluded plot, its value largely tied to its privacy, and the custom-built, wrought iron gate that offered both security and a grand, welcoming entrance. The gate wasn't just functional, it was an aesthetic statement, a bespoke piece of craftsmanship that blended seamlessly with the mature oak trees and manicured hedges lining her long driveway. When she'd bought the house 5 years ago, after years of apartment living and then a smaller, less private starter home, the gate had been one of its primary selling points, a tangible expression of the peace and autonomy she craved in her daily life. The HOA rules, as she understood them from the extensive closing documents she had diligently read, pertained mostly to exterior paint colors, lawn maintenance standards, acceptable fence heights, and noise ordinances. There was certainly nothing, not a single clause, about locking residents out of their own driveways, least of all a responsible dues-paying homeowner like herself. Her first call was to the HOA management office, a bureaucratic entity she usually only interacted with via autopay notifications and the occasional, bland newsletter. The woman who answered, Brenda, had a voice like grinding gravel, mixed with the shrill whine of a faulty alarm. Amelia already felt her patience, thin after the shock, fraying even further. Sunstone Ridge HOA, Brenda speaking. Brenda's voice was devoid of warmth, efficient in a way that felt more robotic than genuinely helpful. Brenda, this is Amelia Vance, 1422 Sycamore Lane. Amelia began, forcing herself to sound calm and professional, despite the fury simmering beneath her composure. My front gate has been padlocked. Do you know anything about this? I'm stuck here. I can't get out of my property. A tremor of disbelief ran through her tone, betraying the controlled facade. Ah, yes, Ms. Vance, Brenda drawled, a hint of self-satisfaction, almost a smugness in her tone that immediately put Amelia on edge. That would be a directive from the board. Outstanding dues. Amelia's jaw dropped, her professional composure instantly shattered. Outstanding dues? That's absolutely impossible, Brenda. My payments are always on time, through automatic withdrawal from my bank account. I've never missed a payment in 5 years, not a single one. Her mind raced through her meticulous financial records, confident in her impeccable payment history. This had to be a mistake, a clerical error, anything but what Brenda was implying. A special assessment, Ms. Vance, for the new common area landscaping project at the main entrance. It was mailed out last month, due 2 weeks ago. Brenda rattled off as if reciting a well-rehearsed script, completely unbothered by Amelia's escalating distress or the absurdity of the situation. Her voice remained flat, monotonous, infuriatingly unhelpful. A special assessment? Amelia hadn't received any mail about a special assessment. This was a critical detail. She was meticulous with her mail, especially anything from the HOA, knowing how quickly minor issues could escalate into major headaches in these communities. Her mail sorter, her filing system, everything was designed to prevent exactly this kind of oversight. I never received that notice, Brenda. Not a single piece of mail, not an email, not a phone call. And even if I did, you can't just lock someone's gate. This is illegal. This is my private property. I have a client meeting I'm already late for. Her voice rose, indignation overriding her initial calm. Brenda's gravelly voice turned dismissive, laced with an air of triumphant authority, as if she were enjoying Amelia's predicament. It's in the bylaws, Ms. Vance. Article 7, subsection C. Failure to remit all outstanding fees, fines, or assessments within 30 days of due date may result in suspension of community privileges, including access to common areas and vehicular ingress via HOA-maintained access points. Brenda's tone was sharp, final, as if the mere recitation of the bylaw was irrefutable proof of their righteousness and Amelia's wrongdoing. My driveway is not an HOA-maintained access point, Amelia practically shouted into the phone, her voice echoing the outrage she felt, vibrating with raw frustration. It's my private property, Brenda. I own this land. This gate is my gate. You have no right to do this. The first 50 feet of your driveway, Ms. Vance, leading directly from the main road, falls within the common easement, and the gate is precisely on that easement line. It was clearly marked on your survey at closing, I assure you. Brenda's voice was now tinged with condescension, as if explaining a basic concept to a particularly slow or stubborn child. The board considers the gate a structural modification on common property, therefore subject to our jurisdiction. Until the $750 assessment is paid, plus a $100 late fee and a $50 lockout fee, the gate remains secured. We accept credit card payments over the phone if you'd like to resolve this quickly. The implication was clear. Pay up and the problem goes away. But for Amelia, it wasn't that simple. Amelia hung up, seething, her hand trembling so violently she nearly dropped the phone. This wasn't just about the money which she could pay, albeit begrudgingly, by dipping into her emergency savings. It was about the brazen overreach, the arbitrary exercise of power, the utter disregard for her rights, her livelihood, and her basic well-being. She pictured Brenda's smug face, savoring her little victory, and the image only fueled her resolve. The immediate consequence was missing an important client meeting that day with a major tech startup, an interaction crucial for securing a lucrative contract for her freelance graphic design business. She lost out on potential earnings an estimated $1,500 for that day alone, and more importantly, risked damaging a professional relationship she had carefully cultivated over months. Her beloved golden retriever, Leo, usually enjoyed his morning run in the fenced yard, but now his routine was disrupted, and he kept nudging the locked gate with a confused whine. Later, her weekly grocery delivery, a lifeline for her busy schedule, had to be painstakingly hauled by hand from the main road, a quarter-mile walk under the oppressive afternoon sun, a process that felt utterly humiliating and physically draining. Her carefully planned life, centered around her work-from-home schedule and independent lifestyle, was thrown into utter chaos by a bureaucratic whim. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was an act of aggression. That evening, after managing to reschedule her client meeting for the following week, Amelia finally got in touch with Marcus Thorne, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer specializing in HOA disputes. Thorne had made a name for himself in the county by taking on these often David and Goliath battles, a niche he'd specialized in due to the sheer volume of homeowner frustrations with overzealous associations. Amelia explained the situation, detailing Brenda's aggressive demeanor and the murky bylaw citation. Thorne listened intently, occasionally interjecting with sharp, probing questions. "Ms. Vance, this is egregious, no doubt," Thorne confirmed, leaning back in his office chair, his gaze fixed on her. "Brenda is right to a point about the easement. Many HOAs draft their documents with broad, almost weaponizable language to give them maximum leverage. They often consider anything touching common ground to be within their purview. However, the method of enforcement here is highly questionable, bordering on illegal. Locking a private gate without ample documented notice, and I mean certified mail, multiple attempts, clear deadlines, not just a vague mailed out last month, and certainly without a court order, is a serious violation of your property rights, regardless of what archaic bylaws they dig up. Thorne advised caution, suggesting a formal letter first to establish their legal position and attempt a resolution. "We have a strong case should it escalate to litigation," he assured her. "They've overstepped significantly. But HOA boards, especially those that have operated unchecked for a while, often believe their own hype. Sometimes they need a firm push or a very public wake-up call to remember they're not feudal lords ruling over their subjects." Amelia, however, wasn't just looking for a legal victory or mere compensation for lost income. She wanted consequences. She wanted the HOA, and specifically Brenda and the board members responsible, to feel the disruption, the inconvenience, the righteous indignation they had so casually inflicted upon her. This was personal. This was about principle. She wouldn't just send a letter and wait. She would make a powerful, undeniable statement that resonated throughout Sunstone Ridge. Her first move was subtle in its execution, yet remarkably effective in its simplicity and profound visual impact. She spent the better part of the evening designing and printing large, clear signs. She chose a bold, easy-to-read, sans serif font against a bright yellow background, making them impossible to ignore. The main text screamed, "HOA locked my gate. Ask me why?" Below the main text, she added smaller, concise bullet points detailing her predicament. No notice received. Private property access denied. Lost income. Is your home next? Demand transparency. She printed dozens, laminating each one for durability against the elements. The next morning, with the help of a kind neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a retired schoolteacher who had lived in Sunstone Ridge for decades and harbored her own quiet resentments against the HOA, she strategically posted them. They were placed discreetly but visibly along the main road leading into Sunstone Ridge, just outside the HOA's main entrance, positioned perfectly where cars would slow down for the speed bump, ensuring maximum visibility. Then, she meticulously set up a temporary collapsible canopy tent just inside her padlocked gate, effectively turning her predicament into a public spectacle, with a sturdy folding table, a few comfortable camping chairs, one for herself, one for Leo, who seemed to enjoy the novelty, a cooler stocked with water and snacks, and her laptop, powered by a quiet portable generator. She made herself surprisingly comfortable. This wasn't just a protest. It was her new, inconvenient outdoor office, a visible symbol of her forced isolation. She worked diligently from under the tent, occasionally looking up to smile or nod at passing cars, an open book, literally and figuratively. Curiosity, she knew, was a powerful force, especially in a tight-knit, albeit sometimes gossipy, community like Sunstone Ridge. Neighbors driving by, seeing the eye-catching signs, and then Amelia sitting patiently and professionally by her locked gate, couldn't help but stop. Some were hesitant, others bold, but almost all paused. Amelia, normally quite private and reserved, transformed into an unlikely and eloquent advocate. She explained her situation calmly, without histrionics or overly dramatic complaints, showing them copies of her impeccable bank statements, proving her regular HOA payments, and detailing Brenda's aggressive, unyielding demeanor. She never raised her voice, never gossiped excessively about specific board members, just stated the facts, presented her documentation, and let the undeniable facts speak for themselves. "They're treating me like a criminal for a special assessment I never received," she'd explain, gesturing to the heavy, menacing lock, a tangible symbol of their arbitrary power. "It cost me a day of work, potentially a major client, lost income, and now I have to walk a quarter mile just to get my mail and groceries. My dog can't even get out for a proper walk without me taking him down the road. If they can do this to me, without proper notice or due process, what can they do to you? Are your property rights truly secure here? Or are they subject to the whims of the HOA board?" The story spread like wildfire through the Sunstone Ridge community, not just through casual conversation and neighborhood strolls, but through existing social media groups, private messaging chains, and impromptu coffee meetups. Many residents, it turned out, harbored their own grievances, small indignities or perceived injustices at the hands of the seemingly untouchable HOA board. There were the mysterious, unexplained increases in annual dues, the arbitrary tree trimming regulations that seemed to target specific homeowners, the bizarre and often contradictory rules about holiday decorations, and the ever-present feeling that the board operated in a vacuum of accountability, making decisions without meaningful resident input. Amelia's dramatic, visible protest ignited a dormant frustration, transforming isolated complaints into a collective outcry. The phrase, "If they can do it to Amelia, they can do it to us," became a powerful rallying cry, echoing through the community. Within days, a dedicated group of residents, galvanized by Amelia's unwavering stand and armed with their own accumulated complaints, formed Sunstone Rights, an informal alliance dedicated to holding the HOA accountable. They started meeting in the evenings, not in formal HOA spaces, but in private homes, and eventually a rented room at the local community center, pooling their grievances and meticulously combing through years of dusty HOA documents, uncovering countless discrepancies. They discovered other questionable special assessments that lacked transparency, ambiguous rules selectively enforced against certain residents, and a general pattern of opacity in the board's dealings. The Common Area Landscaping Project, for example, which was the supposed reason for Amelia's lockout, was drastically over-budgeted by nearly 40%. And it soon came to light that the contract had gone to a company owned by a relative of one of the most influential board members, David Peterson, the HOA president himself. The insidious web of favoritism, nepotism, and potential conflicts of interest began to systematically unravel, exposed by the determined sleuthing of Sunstone rights. The HOA, initially dismissive, treating Amelia's protest as a minor annoyance, a single disgruntled homeowner, started to feel the heat intensely. Calls to Brenda's office escalated from simple inquiries to outright accusations and demands for information. The phone lines constantly jammed. Board meetings, once sparsely attended and concluded swiftly with perfunctory reports, were now standing room only, filled with angry residents demanding answers, often devolving into shouting matches that lasted for hours. David Peterson and the other board members, typically composed, authoritative, and unyielding, began to show visible signs of strain, their faces tight with exasperation and growing fear. They tried to control the narrative, sending out bland emails denying wrongdoing, but the grassroots efforts of Sunstone Rights, armed with facts and personal stories, easily countered their propaganda. Amelia's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, seizing the moment, sent a formal, scathing cease and desist letter to the HOA board and their legal counsel. The letter meticulously detailed the potential legal ramifications of the illegal lockout, including significant lost wages for Amelia, severe emotional distress due to the forced confinement and public humiliation, and punitive damages for their egregious actions. He included a carefully worded threat of a class action lawsuit, noting the burgeoning Sunstone Rights Group and their meticulously documented evidence of wider grievances and alleged financial irregularities. The letter was designed not just to threaten, but to expose the depth of the board's alleged malfeasance, painting a picture of systemic corruption and overreach. The HOA's immediate response was predictable, a desperate, clumsy attempt to regain control through intimidation. They doubled down on their tactics. They sent another certified letter to Amelia, this one even more aggressive, threatening further, even more exorbitant fines for disrupting community harmony, defacing common property, referring to her ubiquitous signs, which were now being supported by other residents posting similar sentiments, and unauthorized use of common areas, her protest tent, which they claimed was a permanent structure. They even attempted to send a maintenance crew, escorted by a bewildered, uncomfortable security guard, to physically remove her protest tent and signs. But the Sunstone Rights members, alerted by Amelia through their new efficient communication network, a dedicated messaging app group, quickly mobilized. They formed a polite but firm human chain around Amelia's tent, preventing access, their numbers growing by the minute as word spread. The scene? captured on several cell phones, quickly found its way to local news channels and social media, drawn by the escalating gate war and the visual drama of residents protecting their neighbor. A local reporter, Sarah Jenkins, hungry for a compelling human interest story with real stakes, broadcast live from Amelia's gate, turning her personal plight into a community-wide saga, forcing the HOA to respond to uncomfortable questions on air. The turning point came not from legal threats or public outcry alone, but from the most sensitive nerve in any HOA community: the pocketbook. A major regional real estate firm, Elite Properties of Sunstone Valley, which had several high-value properties listed in Sunstone Ridge and a significant stake in maintaining its upscale image, abruptly pulled all their listings. Their CEO, a shrewd businesswoman named Eleanor Vance, no relation to Amelia, ironically, recognized the irreparable damage the controversy was doing. The negative publicity, the constant talk of lawsuits, the visible protests, and the general unrest made the community undesirable to potential buyers who were now doing their due diligence on social media, local news, and community forums. Property values, a sacred cow in any HOA community, began to dip noticeably, a fact that sent shivers down the spines of every board member. The firm sent a scathing letter to the HOA board, threatening legal action for devaluation if the situation wasn't immediately rectified. This was no longer just about one homeowner. It was about the financial health of the entire community, the significant investments of all residents, and the personal reputations and potential liabilities of the board members themselves. Suddenly, the board's tone shifted dramatically from defiance to desperation, a palpable sense of panic settling over them. A frantic emergency meeting was called, not just by the board, but by the HOA's corporate legal counsel, who had just flown in on the first available flight, clearly disturbed by the alarming reports and the real estate firm's threat. The board members, previously so confident in their authority and untouchability, now looked haggard, pale, and utterly panicked, their smug expressions replaced by genuine fear of crippling litigation and financial ruin. The aura of control they had projected for years completely vanished. Amelia, still operating from her makeshift office by her now infamous locked gate, received a phone call from David Peterson, the HOA president. His voice, usually booming with self-assurance and authority, was now thin, strained, and almost apologetic, laced with a desperate plea. "Ms. Vance," he began, his voice a stark contrast to his usual bluster. We've reconsidered the situation regarding your gate. The board and our legal team have had a very illuminating discussion, one that has made us realize the gravity of our actions." He paused, as if bracing himself. "Oh?" Amelia replied coolly, allowing herself a small internal smile of satisfaction. She savored the moment of power shift, the taste of vindication for every indignity suffered. "And what precisely have you reconsidered, Mr. Peterson?" The board, after a thorough and exhaustive review of the bylaws and extensive consultation with our corporate legal team, Peterson continued, clearly reading from a prepared, very carefully worded statement, has determined that the lockout was an overly aggressive and disproportionate enforcement action. We sincerely and unequivocally apologize for the profound inconvenience and distress it has caused you, and for the undeniable negative impact it has had on the community as a whole. He even added, a concession Amelia knew was Thorne's influence, We recognize now that our communication regarding the special assessment was grossly insufficient, lacking the necessary transparency and due process. And we deeply regret the distress caused by that severe oversight. We understand we have eroded trust. He then launched into a detailed offer. Immediate removal of the lock, waiving all fees, the initial $750 assessment, plus the $100 late fee and the outrageous $50 lockout fee, and a full credit to her account for any documented lost income and expenses she could prove. He also magnanimously offered to cover all her legal fees, a clear, desperate sign of their desire to avoid a protracted, financially ruinous lawsuit. Amelia listened patiently, her lawyer Marcus Thorne on speakerphone, silently taking meticulous notes. But then she responded, her voice firm, resolute, and unwavering, not allowing an ounce of triumph or gloating to betray her deep satisfaction. Mr. Peterson, an apology is certainly a start, and compensation for my direct financial losses is indeed fair. But the consequences of your actions extend far beyond my gate. My neighbors, the integrity of this community, and the once respected reputation of Sunstone Ridge have all been severely damaged. You've eroded trust, fostered deep division, and demonstrated a profound and systemic lack of transparency and accountability that has impacted every homeowner. She then laid out her terms, negotiated with her lawyer's precise guidance, terms that had been carefully crafted and refined by the entire Sunstone Rights Group over countless late-night meetings, representing the collective will of the community. 1. Immediate lock removal and unconditional public apology. Not just the physical removal of the lock, but a comprehensive written and public apology from the entire board, prominently circulated to all residents via official HOA email, postal mail, and prominently displayed on the HOA website. This apology had to explicitly state the HOA's error, acknowledge Amelia's name, and formally withdraw all fines and threats against her. 2. Full independent financial audit. A complete independent audit of the HOA's finances for the past 3 fiscal years, particularly focusing on the common area landscaping project, other special assessments, and vendor contracts. The results of this audit were to be made fully public and accessible to all residents within 60 days. 3rd, board accountability and resignations. The immediate resignation of Brenda, the discredited property manager, and at least 2 specific board members, she named David Peterson, the president, and Mrs. Albright, the treasurer, who had been most vocal in their support of the lockout and the questionable landscaping contract. These resignations were to be formally announced to the community. 4th bylaw review and clarification with resident oversight. A comprehensive commitment to review and thoroughly clarify all ambiguous bylaws, especially those concerning property access, enforcement procedures, and special assessments, ensuring they were fair, transparent, and legally sound. This review was to include transparent resident input, workshops, and a binding community-wide vote on proposed changes. 5. Resident-centric governance restructuring. A formal, documented commitment to a more resident-centric approach to HOA governance. This included regular, truly open town halls with published agendas and minutes, the creation of an independent resident oversight committee with real power to review board decisions and financials, and mandatory ethics training for all current and future board members. Peterson stammered, clearly taken aback, his voice tight with a mixture of shock and residual defiance. Ms. Vance, those are extensive. Some of those demands are unprecedented for an HOA. The board, this will require significant discussion. So were the consequences of locking my gate, Mr. Peterson, she stated, her voice firm, unwavering, leaving no room for doubt. And I assure you, extensive is only the beginning if these terms aren't met. The Sunstone Rights Group is growing every day. We have meticulously documented evidence of every irregularity, and we are prepared for a very long, very public fight, including a class action lawsuit that will undoubtedly be far more costly and damaging to the HOA's reputation than agreeing to these terms. This will get far, far worse for the HOA and its current leadership, not better. Within 48 hours, under the watchful eyes of a local news camera crew, alerted by Sunstone Rights, the padlock was dramatically removed by a humbled maintenance worker. A contrite, carefully worded apology, signed by every remaining board member, was emailed to every resident, prominently featuring Amelia's name and admitting to grievous errors in judgment and failures of due process. Brenda was no longer with Sunstone Ridge HOA management, a carefully phrased euphemism for her swift dismissal, and 2 board members, including David Peterson and Mrs. Albright, tendered their resignations, citing personal reasons, but effectively removed by the community's pressure. The independent audit was promptly announced with a transparent timeline, and the controversial landscaping contractor's deal was immediately frozen pending its results. The Sunstone Rights Group, now an official and respected entity, was formally invited to participate in the bylaw review process and nominate members for the new Oversight Committee. Amelia Vance, the woman whose gate was locked, had not just unlocked her own driveway. She had unlocked a wave of fundamental change within Sunstone Ridge. Her personal inconvenience, a seemingly minor act of bureaucratic tyranny, had sparked a profound community awakening, transforming a passive group of homeowners into an active, engaged force for accountability and transparent governance. The HOA, once a seemingly unassailable fortress of petty rules, arbitrary decisions, and unchecked power, had finally faced the real tangible consequences of their actions. And for Amelia, driving through her gate once more, the sun shining brightly on her property, Leo wagging his tail excitedly in the passenger seat, the victory felt infinitely sweeter and more profound than any financial compensation. It was the powerful taste of justice, hard-won and bravely shared, a testament to the enduring power of one person standing up to perceived authority and inspiring a community to reclaim its voice.